Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Cyber Disaster Recovery with Zerto and Databarracks. I'm James Watts. I'm the Managing Director here at Databarracks, and we're joined today by Chris Rogers, Senior Technology Evangelist from Zerto. Chris is going to be leading the session. I'll hand over to him in just a second, but I'll start with a couple of quick bits of housekeeping. Firstly, big thanks to Chris for joining us. He's done more than a couple of these with us in the past, back when we'd have been using Zerto red slides rather than HPE green, but always has some really good insight into all the developments and new features coming through from Zerto. So we are recording this session, and we will share recording and slides afterwards. If you have any questions, type away in the panel on the right hand side. We'll have a section at the end of the session today where we can answer them if we've not read it, to answer as we go. And so with that, I'll pass over to you, Chris. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, and yeah, thank you for joining on nice and early for most of us on Thursday. So yes, let's dive in. We've only got 30 minutes, so let's go straight into the content. So briefly, what am I hearing in the marketplace and the challenges we're seeing? So the first one, obviously, being cyber threats. You know, the biggest thing that we see on the news and in all the IT publications I read and emails I get in my inbox is, hey, this company's been hit and now it's this, and this government has been hit and this one and that. It's not going away. It's not getting any smaller. And one of the stats that I love. I say I love, but love to present, but hate to see, is most organizations take on average 1 month to recover from a ransomware attack. I think we can do better, and we have to do better moving forward. That's why it's so prevalent now that these ransomware attacks are disruptive. They cause a lot of downtime and cause a lot of pain, hence why people pay the ransom. And then the second one is just disruptions in general. Could be cyber threats, could be disaster recovery, it could be the CrowdStrike thing that happened a few weeks back, which people seem to have forgotten about really quickly. But every organization has on average 4 severe data disruptions per year. 1 data disruption per quarter. That's you're only ever a few weeks away from either on the back of one or leading up to one. So we've really got to make sure we are secure in our data protection strategy and understand what we need to do, how we transact and how we execute, and make sure we're able to survive that. And then cloud complexity. 91% of organizations have altered their cloud strategy since COVID-19 hit. So I know COVID was a little while back now. We don't really talk about it much, but that strategy is a long-term strategy. It's not a 1, 2, or 3. Sometimes it's a 5 or 10-year strategy of, are we moving to the cloud? Are we having hybrid? Are we doing this, that, and the other? And people are altering that always. And I think one of the things we're going to be talking about in a bit is altering people's strategies massively as well. And that thing is obviously the VMware acquisition that happened. I don't think anybody really expected the impact and the kind of the shockwaves that it sent through the industry. When it first happened, everyone was a bit shocked and a bit like, oh, maybe a bit uneasy. And as it closed, people were like, okay, that's okay. And then kind of all the news filtered out and trickled down. And some of the bad news we can see on the slide, right? This is stuff that I've picked up from Google and from the web, right? Just by Googling Broadcom news. You can see some of the big headlines here of driving up costs, killing VMware, the end stuff with AWS and all these things. So suddenly you can see that it's getting people nervous. It's getting people kind of in a situation where they don't feel safe anymore. VMware used to be a golden ticket, right? It was always in every single data center, and now we're seeing disruption and we're seeing things that are an ever-changing landscape. So, James, what are you seeing from your point of view? Obviously, you are probably a VMware customer, I'd imagine. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you hearing from you and your customers? What's your experience so far of that of those newses and things that hit?
Yeah, exactly all of the above. I mean, we are a VMware customer ourselves, but obviously the vast majority of our customers are, and it's, yeah, as you say, it's hard to think of any similar scenario that's been as negatively received as this one. I would say almost every customer is now reviewing VMware as their hypervisor. We've got some customers with large environments who aren't able to move quickly, so I think they feel more held to ransom than anything. They're committed because they can't move fast enough, but are now looking at longer term alternatives, which for us, I think the biggest surprise for us has been the kinds of alternatives that people are actually considering. So my assumption would have been, if you're not using VMware, it's going to be okay, Hyper-V, perhaps Nutanix, or a cloud migration. But actually, we've had a lot of customers who've then got in touch about support and interoperability with some of the far less common hypervisors, not just KVM. And I mean, the one in particular that really surprised me was Proxmox, which was something that I barely heard of. Certainly wouldn't have considered to be mature enough as a hypervisor for the customers that are looking at it. And I think that speaks to the urgency and the scale of the problem. We're in a situation where people are entertaining options that you wouldn't have even considered a couple of years ago. So I mean, that speaks to just how high that price hike has been.
Yeah, 100%, and exactly what you laid out there, James. What we're going to discuss in the next slide. So, if we look at previous, infrastructure landscapes, this is probably what people were seeing, right? We had people were, and at some point it was up to 80 or 90% VMware, right? In the hypervisor and kind of other landscape, it was massive VMware estates, and people were banking on it. It was the automatic renewal. It was in pretty much every single data center. Companies were built upon the VMware ecosystem, and Zerto was one of those, right? Zerto started its life as a VMware to VMware product only. Back in 2009, I think it was the first iteration. If VMware didn't exist, Zerto doesn't exist, right? So, and a lot of these companies around the world are exactly the same. And you could kind of bank on VMware being there, right? But as we move forward in 2025 and above, this is exactly what James has just spoken about there. We're going to start to see this proliferation away from potential VMware into these other environments. So Azure is going to take a chunk, AWS are going to take a chunk, Hyper-V. But as James said, we're starting to see these kind of left wing and strange options. So as Proxmox, exactly that. I knew it as just almost like a lab environment thing, right? People were, using it in their labs for a nice cheap way of running hypervisors, and didn't have to try and worry about, getting licensing and stuff. And suddenly it's come to a main, and people are starting to use it in production systems for large organizations. And whether they've done their due diligence, whether they haven't, that's down to them. But I hadn't really heard about it, and I've been in the hypervisor game, for a long time. I've been in this industry for a while now. So we are seeing this proliferation. And then there's a stat here from Forrester, their prediction that 20% of enterprise customers will begin to leave in 2024. And we are starting to see that. And when we see enterprise customers, these are some of the largest customers in the world. And if, as James said, the smaller you are, hopefully the easier it is to kind of go, actually, we are going to up sticks and move, and we are going to move to an AWS or an Azure or KVM or Hyper-V or wherever else you're evaluating, right? So I think everyone's kind of aware of that landscape, but we are starting to see the start of the VMware, kind of the move away, if you will. The kind of not the migration, because I don't think if people are going to fully get rid of VMware. In some companies they will, some they won't. Some of them they'll stick with their golden jewels on VMware and then move other things elsewhere. But we're starting to see that question mark starting to be raised. In America, I think they're a bit ahead of us, to be honest with you, in terms of they're actively moving and gone. Whereas I think in Europe we're maybe a little bit more, a little less gung ho and a little kind of like, okay, let's see what it looks like. Let's see what the land is. Let's go and test these solutions a bit more rigorously and see what impact that has. Whereas a lot of them are in America have just gone, we're not paying that, we're gone type of thing. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in Europe over the next year or so. So obviously we're here to kind of discuss how can we help you, right? So how do we help you with those challenges? So I want to speak to you about, we're going to speak to actually maybe just 2 use cases today, because we haven't really got a huge amount of time. So we're going to be talking about disaster recovery to and within the cloud, and also cyber resilience later on today. So the first one we're going to be discussing is, disaster recovery to and within the cloud. People typically would be doing disaster recovery between their private cloud environments, two VMware estates, whatever it may be. But over the last probably 5 to 10 years, the public cloud's really taken a stride into being that disaster recovery site and offering that hybrid cloud option for people to not run secondary data centers and use the advantages of the cloud. And when we look at that, it's quite it's quite a compelling message, right? So we've got that I can't say this word, elasticity and on demand, right? So we're not having to pay for resources, servers, storage, etc. when we're not using them for the majority of the time, and hopefully, touch wood, we'd never have to use RDR sites, but we need to know they're there, and we need to have BCDR plans in place in case the worst does happen. But it does come at a cost, right? If we're keeping primary storage, fast CPUs and power on all the time, all that type of thing costs money, right? Whereas if we store it in public cloud, we get all the benefits and the of the cost effectiveness and being able to store it in a lower cost environment, but then also the ability to have that elasticity to spin up and stretch out when we need to. Cost and time efficient, I think, is one of the biggest ones. Cost efficiencies we've kind of just spoken about, storing things cheaper. We don't have the power, the rent on the data centers, the cab space, the maintenance of all that hardware to worry about as well. But also the time efficiencies. We don't have to send people to data centers anymore. It can all be done from a remote desk wherever you are in the world, right? And obviously with Zerto and Databarracks, that becomes even simpler because Zerto is such a simple tool to use, and Databarracks know the tool inside out and know all the environment variables as well, so that you've got a real expert to kind of go, actually, we'll take hold of your disaster recovery or your, all your BCDR plans and backups, etc. And we're the experts in doing that. You concentrate on what your business is good at. We'll concentrate on making sure your stuff is secure and recoverable, etc. The cloud's also secure. Yeah, go on. Yeah, James. Yeah, dive in.
On that point, yeah. So I wonder, because there'll be some people on this webinar today who aren't Databarracks customers, or perhaps don't know the kind of the journey that we took. So we previously ran Zerto into our own data centers. We obviously have a number of services of backup and disaster recovery, which we were running into our own data centers. But years ago, we could see all of the interest that was in using the public cloud, both for these use cases, but also as a longer term stepping stone for migration. And so we made the shift 5+ years ago, where we moved all of our customers from the DC into the public cloud. For exactly those reasons. There are some other challenges in the public cloud, but you obviously get all of these these fantastic benefits. And that point about the cost saving, obviously that always made that was always the case with the public cloud, but we're seeing it now even more so with the shift on VMware. We have customers who work with us for backup services and customers who work with us for disaster recovery services, some who will work with us for both, but we have a number of customers who would work with us for backup, but were running Zerto between their own data centers. And that makes sense. If you've got a couple of data centers, it's a good deal. All of those people are now hit doubly because you're running those two environments, and so suddenly that option of running a secondary data center yourself has become even more expensive. For me, it makes so much sense to say, yeah, why not use the public cloud for what is pretty much in our eyes the best use case for it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thanks for that, James. So yeah, I think disaster recovery cloud paints a great picture, and I've seen definitely a shift of even the largest companies in the world starting to use public cloud for disaster recovery, because it does make so much sense. When we mentioned, we've kind of gone with the hassle-free, fully managed. You explained that incredibly well, but also it is performant. It's not as if the public cloud gives you a drop off in performance. Sometimes we've actually seen customers move to public cloud and actually see a performance increase, because maybe their equipment on premises was 3, 4, 5 years old, and actually moving to the public cloud is actually increased performance, going newer CPUs, faster storage, etc. So just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean it's going to be any less secure or any less performant, as long as you do things properly. And that's where an expert like Databarracks is going to come in, making sure your public cloud environment is as secure as it needs to be. And then we look at disaster recovery between cloud environments. So if you are doing a migration or a lift and shift into public cloud because you want to move away from the ecosystem you're currently in, you do need to make sure you still have disaster recovery, backups, etc. inside the public cloud. Your data, your responsibility, no matter where it lives. So doing disaster recovery between regions or cloud environments. I'd say most popularly people do them between regions. So between Europe and UK and Azure data centers, or even if you wanted to between public clouds. So you could do between Azure and AWS if you really wanted to. All of that coming with a rapid RPO and RTO. And those are really the two metrics that we really care about when we're talking about disaster recovery: is how much data can you afford to lose, and how much time can you afford to lose. Both of those metrics are going to be variable for every company, but for most people, it's going to be minimizing those. Minimize the amount of data loss we have, minimize the amount of downtime we have. That's the idea of disaster recovery. All of this should be fully automated and orchestrated. So when we're talking about that downtime, if we're recovering single VMs and we're having to make applications up manually and all those types of things, it becomes difficult, it becomes time consuming, and also error prone as well. So where we build a full automation orchestration layer around those hard to do things, making sure things are on the right IP addresses, on the right storage, in the right place, failing over at the right times, that simplifies the operation and speeds it up massively. And the tool is also purpose built for each cloud. So we're not just lifting and shifting our VMware product and putting it in Azure and say, hey, it works. We're actually utilizing the benefits of public cloud, some of the serverless computing and Azure queues and functions inside of those clouds to make sure it's performant, but also as cost efficient as possible inside of each cloud environment. So now we've kind of just discussed disaster recovery to and within the cloud. I want to move on to migrations, just as a very, very quick topic. I know we're kind of running a little bit behind, so I'm going to kind of gloss over this a little bit because I want to get into the cyber threats a little bit more deeper. So if you are looking to migrate to the cloud, you want to make sure it's risk-free. You want to make sure that you don't have any data loss and it's done quickly and seamlessly. So reducing migration windows from potentially days and weeks down to potentially minutes or hours, depending on how many virtual machines you've got. That's what Zerto can help you achieve. It is a cost-effective way of migrating because we're migrating data simply and effectively using our continuous data protection methods. And it can be expertly planned and executed ahead of time with a partner like Databarracks as well. So if you are considering a migration to the cloud, please consider using Zerto, but also including a partner such as Databarracks in your planning, because these guys do this stuff on a regular basis. As I said, they know the environments inside out, so they can help you make sure that you're not causing more problems, by migrating than you're going to solve, that type of thing. So yeah, I know I've glossed over that real quick, but I want to make sure that we cover cyber threats. We've got some really cool statistics and some conversation to go through this. So and on the cyber threats piece, as I said before, it's probably I never have a conversation with a customer, a partner, an analyst, or the press without cyber coming into the conversation at some point. So we have to cover it and we have to give it airtime. I know people may be a little bit bored of it, but I think it's the number one threat to most organizations today and most organizations' data. So I'm going to pass over to James because Databarracks have done a data health check in this year to 2024, and he's going to run through some statistics they found, and we're going to have a conversation about some of those as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we've, this is a survey that we've been running since 2008. So we've been running our annual survey of UK IT decision makers for a really long time, and that's been good for uncovering some really interesting trends and changes over that period. So I'll start with, to Chris's point, he's absolutely right. This kind of comes up an enormous amount about, this is a surprise to no one that cyber is the threat, but I think it's worth showing a couple of these stats because it does illustrate why it's become the focus of so much in terms of continuity planning. So the first statistic I want to share is that cyber is now the #1 cause of both data loss and downtime. Now, on this particular graph, cyber attacks are the light blue column. So you can see in 2022, it took over as the leading cause, peaked in 2023, and then we've had a slight dip last year. Now, it's too early to know if that's a genuine change in the trend or if it's a blip or an anomaly. This is the benefit of running the survey over multiple years. We'll be able to see that and how it plays out as we zoom out. But there is some reason for positivity here. So some of the other findings that we found this year, so cyber insurance is up. More businesses have cyber insurance, but fewer are making claims, and more businesses are now recovering themselves from ransomware rather than paying out. And we think the cause for that is obviously there's been an increased barrier for you to cross in order to get cyber coverage. Things like having cybersecurity tools in place, business continuity plans, testing schedules, etc., in order to actually get that coverage. But because those cyber insurance companies don't want to be paying out all the time, they are forcing organizations to increase their preparedness, which hopefully is what is making a dent here. If Chris, we move to the next slide, the next question here is downtime, and these are the two metrics that we use when we measure continuity incidents. So how much downtime have you had? How much data loss have you had? You can see here in this case, cyber is the green line, and that's gone from 10% in 2018 up to 24%. So it's over doubled in a really short space of time. Again, if we were to zoom out even further and take this all the way back to when we started asking this question in 2008, we're in single digits. And again, I think it illustrates why this is such a significant concern from everyone. 10 plus years ago, this was something that was one of the risks that was in the mix with kind of everything else that you were dealing with. Now it is the sole cause of kind of everyone's attention. So if you could jump to the next slide, Chris. The other thing I wanted to highlight from the data health check was we're now seeing a real challenge, I think, around expectations of recovery. So in the business continuity and kind of organizational resilience world, one of the terms that we'll use is maximum tolerable period of disruption. And that's how long could you be down for before that outage has an impact that becomes unacceptable. And for the number of organizations that say they need to be up within less than 4 hours, that's increasing. So almost a third of organizations are now saying they need to be up and running within 4 hours, or the disruption is going to be, have a significant impact to them. The flip side of this is, what's the current recovery time objective you can actually achieve? And while the expectation is getting higher, the delivery is getting longer. So the number of organizations that can actually recover within 12 hours is dropping. The number who say it will be between 12 and 24, or it's going to take over a day, is increasing. And I mean, firstly, that's absolutely correct. Secondly, that's probably optimistic. I mean, we know personally that when we talk about cyber recoveries, Chris highlighted earlier about ransomware recoveries taking up to a month. In some cases, you're not even in a position to be able to begin that recovery for 12 or 24 hours. But I think the reason that we have a more realistic expectation around recovery time objectives, and that is increasing, is because people are doing more testing. So I think it's a difficult position at the moment. The struggle for IT, cyber, risk and resilience professionals is that there's a better expectation of the realities of recovery because we're doing more testing, but at the same time there's this increased expectation from an organization, and that's a hard place to be. Now the last stat that I'll share here is we asked the question about doing a full DR test from backups, so not from Zerto, not from disaster recovery and replication, but a full recovery from backups. 62% said they'd done one in the last year. A further 24% said they had done one, but not this year. So it's 86% in total say they've done a full DR test from backups, which we find completely unbelievable. Very few organizations do a full DR test from backups. It takes a really, really long time. It's an enormous amount of resource to do so. Now, there is a reason you might want to do that. There are cases when you need to recover from a cyber incident that will predate a recovery journal, and you need to recover there. We've done both. We've done ransomware recoveries using replication, using disaster recovery, and from backup. It's a much faster, much more kind of painless experience if you can do it from replication. And it's the reason obviously we're such big advocates of Zerto. Sorry, quick whistle stop. I'll pass back to you. Go for it, Chris.
Perfect. No, thanks for that. Really interesting stats, and yeah, I agree with you. I think this stat is optimistic, especially from backups. Yeah, people, if you're talking about 100 VMs, 200, 500 VMs, doing that from backup is going to take you a long time. So while we're on the case of backups as well, I think the outlook is broadly positive. That I think we're on the right trend to getting on top of the battle, but I still don't think we're winning the battle, right? Because we still have organizations who pay the ransom on a regular basis. And I want to go through 3 reasons why, or these were from a survey that Zerto and HP did quite recently with IDC around cyber resilience, disaster recovery, and AI. And these were the top 3 reasons that people decided that they wanted to pay the ransom or had to pay the ransom. And typically, if I'm doing this in a room, I'll ask the question, what do you think it's going to be? And everyone always says, oh, the backups were hit by ransomware, so they couldn't recover, right? Wrong. The top 3 reasons were the backups were good, but paying the ransom resulted in less data loss. The backups were good, but paying the ransom was a faster way to recover, and they weren't sure what had been compromised, so the restoration was too difficult anyway. So when you look at the top 2, I think it's mind-boggling that this is actually a company or companies, multiple, that their backups were working exactly as designed, exactly as specified, with all their regulatory compliance ticked off, etc. But they still paid the ransom because they realized that backups would take them too long to recover and they would lose too much data loss. And I think this is the clear piece of the puzzle where I don't think backups and I don't think disaster recovery alone solves for cyber resilience. I think we're moving the ball. People are moving the ball game. Right? The bad guys are becoming smarter and harder to detect, and the impact is worse. And I think when we look at that, I think cyber recovery is underfunded. If we're just looking at the backups we're using for the last 5 years or 10 years, I think we need to start looking again and going, okay, how do I make sure I am more protected? How do I make sure I am better prepared for a cyber event rather than just an event as before? So let's dive into cyber resilience in what it looks like with Zerto. So we look at things quite simply on the 3 major pillars. So we've got replicate and detect, isolate and locked, and test and recover. So replicate and detect is very simple for us. We do real-time replication combined with real-time encryption detection. So essentially replicating your data with RPOs in seconds, but also whilst we're doing that, if you're coming from a VMware environment, we can actually detect encryption as it happens. So we can give you an early warning signal that something in your environment doesn't look quite right, so we can stop an attack, or you guys can stop an attack before hopefully it spreads too far in your environment, meaning less data to recover, quicker recovery, less downtime. The second one here being isolate and lock. Locking data away, isolating it away from the bad guys is truly the only way of them not getting hold of it. Now that's your golden copy. We need to make sure we have a golden copy to recover to. And the last one being test and recover, making sure we do test frequently, but also comprehensively. It's not just good enough to test 1 or 2 VMs. We need to be doing comprehensive disaster and cyber recovery testing, and as often as we possibly can. So I know we've only got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to speed through these slides. So if we do have any questions, we can get to a couple of questions. So Zerto for cyber resilience with immutability. So Zerto has a journal. That's where we store all of our data in, but we also have the ability to send copies of data from our journal outside your production storage into Microsoft Azure, for instance, in their object storage. Put object lock on, make sure no one can touch it. So even if someone gets hold of the keys to the castle and the kingdom, and they manage to get hold of Zerto and completely wipe everything and delete it, we've still got a copy in Microsoft Azure that we can recover from. No one can touch that, it's immutable. Not even if you're the hyper admin of Zerto, you can go in and delete that. So making sure stuff is immutable is key. So I think we've got 2 minutes left. I'm going to gloss over the how we deliver value, and the slides will be sent out in the recording anyway, so people can read this if they really want to. But I'm going to let us have just a couple of questions, because I'm sure we have got some questions in the chat. We've covered a lot today. So yeah, James, what have we got in the chat? What have we got in the questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for skipping through a couple. That was a good choice. So the first question, which is interesting, I don't know if you can answer, but so what do you think will happen to VMware? Will it disappear altogether?
No, I don't think it'll disappear. I think if you look at what Broadcom's strategy has been with previous acquisitions, if you look at they acquired Symantec a little while back, and the Symantec, a long time ago, were actually an enterprise grade, antivirus and protection solution. They kind of stripped the assets, got rid of pretty much what they're doing, the same playbook or a similar playbook to what they're doing with VMware, right? They want to keep their most valuable customers, but also then profit from the rest of them. So I actually am very good friends with a VMware architect who works at a very, very large global bank. And they've actually had a reduction in their licensing because that's how important they are to VMware. They've seen a reduction in their licensing costs because they want to keep them. And if you look at their MO, that's similarly what they're doing, right? Going direct, cutting out partners and going direct to the biggest customers to make sure they get value and keep them on board. And then the rest, they're kind of diluting down and saying, okay, they did a lot with the partners and people had to reapply and become, different partners, and they want to manage less but gain more out of it. So I don't think it will disappear completely. It will still be around. There'll still be very, very large customers working, and but it won't be as I don't think it'll be as mainstream as it once was. I think that we'll see that proliferation of customers moving to other places. But I think they'll always be there, and they think they'll always have a big game to play in certain environments as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think I agree. It seems doom and gloom in the minute, but I think we're perhaps at the start of this change since the move to Broadcom. So maybe we need to give it another year before we're ready to
agreed.
To put the nail in the coffin. There's a question here, actually, I think perhaps I can take, because I remember we actually did some testing on this. So it's how does the recovery speed compare with Zerto to VMware versus into the cloud? So we actually, we tested this with a customer who were doing exactly that. It was, and this was a little while ago, it was slower, but not by a long way. So the fastest certainly is still VMware to VMware, but the difference was relatively marginal. And for that particular customer, they had their business continuity recovery objectives set at the business level. It still met and achieved all of those. So they they were decommissioning a data center, so it achieved exactly what they wanted. I think certainly we were relatively early in testing Zerto into Azure, and I think in the very early iterations there was a much bigger difference, but that's really narrowed. I think there's Chris mentioned a couple of the bits of the kind of Azure functionality that's used by Zerto now, but it's now much faster. And then I think probably we've got room for a couple of quick ones before we kind of close off, but these are just around support, Chris. So Hyper-V supported by Zerto?
Yes, yeah, we it's a little bit of a crazy story. We deprecated Hyper-V a couple of years ago because the market wasn't really there, and Microsoft itself wasn't really as a focused product on Hyper-V. They were moving to the Azure Stack suite, and we're kind of not sunsetting it, but letting it run its course, if you will. So we actually deprecated it because it just wasn't valuable enough to us to keep development support. And obviously, as the VMware stuff came out, the Hyper-V train charged back through and gained speed again. So we actually brought back support and have started investment back into the development of the product as well. So yes, fully supported.
Yeah, well, it affected Microsoft's Hyper-V roadmap. They changed as a result of this. So I think, yeah, that speaks to the significance. And then the last one, just will any other hypervisors be added to support for Zerto?
Yeah, so at Discover in June in Vegas, July. Is it June or July? June it was. That's a long time ago. We announced that we'll be supporting KVM this year. So towards the end of the calendar year, you can expect a release with Zerto for KVM. It'll be our first GA release of KVM. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for information on that. But yeah, that's really exciting for us moving into the KVM world. Hopefully, kind of concreting and solidifying that multi-cloud approach that we really do have, giving people that extra option if they don't want to do a VMware or Hyper-V, they have got a KVM option and public cloud as well. So
fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Well, I'll close it off there. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Thank you, Chris, for a terrific session.
I've enjoyed it. It's great.
We'll distribute all of the resources afterwards, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session. Thank you all. See you.